Hello, you're listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. A little bit of a different podcast episode from me today. It's talking about something that I don't normally talk about, or not a lot anyway, and that's because it's all about me. So a couple of reasons for that. The first one was that last Monday, I opened up my Instagram and I was tagged in a post. I was tagged by the Equestrian Business Awards and I was absolutely gobsmacked, surprised, shocked, delighted, thrilled. And I had to read it a few times because I've been selected as a finalist, and I'm a finalist in the Equestrian Media category for this podcast. So absolutely blew me away. All those other cliches, over the moon. Yeah, I was just walking on air, just literally walking on air. So I wanted to thank you if you nominated me, because it really does mean the world to me. It really does. This is just blown it out of the park. You can tell I'm absolutely speechless and very, very grateful. So thank you so much. So I'm kind of asking now for something else, if you like, that as a pay it forward as well with it. So I would love if you like this podcast and if you feel compelled to do so, if you would write me a 5-star review. Just a little review on Apple or Spotify. Most people listen on Apple or Spotify, but you may be on a different platform that also allows reviews, and that's fine too. And I am already in advance sending you a huge thank you for doing that for me, but also a little bit of a bonus. So those of you who do write me a review, go ahead then and email me or send me a message on social media to say that you've done it, because what I want to do is to put together a workshop for you. So everyone who writes me a 5-star review before now and the 10th of July, so you've got a bit of time yet, I'm going to put a workshop together for the first, haven't quite decided whether it's the first 10 or the first 12 people who write the review. And the workshop is coming together in my mind. It'll be an hour long. It'll be on the 10th of July at 6 p.m. UK time. So at the moment we're GMT +1. And I'm saying that because I know that just over 50% of people are in the UK, but around about 49% of people who listen to this podcast are spread all around the world. And I think now we're up to 35 different countries. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast, wherever you're listening. It really does mean huge amounts to me. So the second reason that I'm talking a little bit about me, besides that finalist announcement, is that somebody, in fact, 2 people, suggested a topic for the podcast episodes and they wanted to know more about me. So probably be a very short podcast, this one, but I thought I would tell you a little bit about my horsey journey, a little bit about my confidence journey mixed in with that, and a couple of little things just in general about me, where I live and what I like to do and what floats my boat, that kind of thing. So my horsey journey started when I was probably around about 4 years old, certainly preschool. My grandma worked in her brother's greengrocer's shop and they had a Saturday lad. And the Saturday lad would come and help out with all the heavy lifting of the potato sacks and the carrots and things like that. And he also rode at the weekend for an old lady. And my grandma knew that I was starting to really like horses. I would sort of point them out in fields and things. And so she asked the Saturday lad, Alan, if I could come along and ride horses with him. And, at the time, my grandma was probably my age. I think of her as an old lady. And Alan rode for an old lady. And I'm always intrigued now to know, how old was the old lady? She was probably 60 or something, but she was this old lady who no longer rode. So Alan said that would be fine, and off we went. We went to somewhere near Newtonley Willows, and which is up, I think it's Lancashire. It might be just in Merseyside now in England. And we went to Newtonley Willows, and I rode a little pony, a dapple grey pony, beautiful, beautiful pony called Dawn. And my grandma brought carrots for Dawn from the shop. And we used to have a great time. And I was kind of roped to Alan's horse, if you like. So it was bit ring to bit ring. We were roped together. And Alan's horse just seemed huge to me. The horse was probably about 15 hands, but just looked amazing. This big grey horse, a real kind of probably a large cob when I think about it, but I didn't think about it when I was 4 years old. It was just this amazing bay with white socks. And off we would go across the fields, and we would walk, and my grandma would be calling out to us, "Don't you dare trot, Alan." But once we went over a little wooden bridge that was on the old lady's land, my grandma and granddad couldn't see me anymore. They couldn't see the horses. We sort of went into this dip. And Alan would turn to me and say, "Do you want to trot?" And so trotting, as we all know, when you first do it, and especially when you're little, it's like galloping, isn't it? And yeah, absolutely. So we would trot. I don't think we cantered, but we certainly did trot across the fields. And from then on, I was even more obsessed with horses. I absolutely loved them. Went for riding lessons at Croft Equestrian Centre, which is up near Warrington, where I was living, and went there for a couple of years. And then fortunes changed. It would be the winter of 1978, 1979, so a long, long time ago. But people who were around at that time, you might remember, even if you were just a small child, especially in the UK, there was quite a lot of economic upheaval then. There were lots of strikes going on. There was lots of times in the evening when the electricity would go off because the people who worked for the electricity board would be on strike, or the television would go off at 7 o'clock because the cameramen or the technicians would be on strike. I remember my mum baking bread because the people who made bread and delivered the bread would be on strike. There were times when the firemen were on strike, and you would see the green goddesses, these fire engines that the army have, and the army would go out to the fires. So a very odd time. But it also meant for my family a little bit of a tightening of the belts. So I couldn't go riding anymore. Still love my horses, and sort of probably only a few hundred yards away from where I lived, there was a pub, and the pub had a bit of land, and on that land was a horse. So I would go and pick grass for the horse and feed the horse grass, even though the horse was in a field full of grass. I would go and do that to get my horsey fix. So I was still sort of seeing horses and loving horses and reading Pony magazine. I was reading the Pauline Thompson books, Monica Dickens, all of those kind of books as well. So my horsey love never disappeared, but I couldn't really ride anymore. And then I went to university. In those days, I don't know if this happens anymore, but the first day or so, maybe a few more days, there weren't any real proper lectures. It was all kind of getting your bearings around the university. And one of the things that they did in the main hall was to have lots and lots of stands for all the clubs and societies that the university had. So I made a beeline for the equestrian stand, the club. I don't even know what they were called. And I remember one of the girls on the stand looked me up and down and said, "Have you got your own horse?" in rather a snotty little way. And I said, "No, I haven't, but I'm really keen, and I'm really keen to learn how to look after horses." And she turned away and didn't even look at me and said, "Well, we only take people who have their own horses." And before I could say, "But I'd love to help, I'll muck out, I'll sweep up," she turned to a friend and was just ignoring me. So horses, I'm afraid, for a long while were something that I encountered on holidays. I would always try and get a trek in across Dartmoor or something like that. You spend quite a few holidays in Devon in my 20s. And then when I was, how old would I be? 30 something, maybe 31, or maybe just about 30, I moved to America with my job, and I lived in Kansas. And in Kansas, I was hoping to become a bit of a cowgirl, to be honest. I was hoping to ride Western across the prairies. This didn't exactly happen. I went to the riding school. And I said, that's what I'd love to do. I want to sit in a Western saddle, and I want to ride, trail rides. And they said, "Oh, no, we don't do any of that. We ride English." And I thought, oh my goodness, I've come how many thousands of miles? And they ride the same way that they ride at home. So nevertheless, it was the only riding school, probably for about 200 miles or something ridiculous. And I started to learn to ride. And I remember watching somebody, and they were doing 20-meter circles in canter. And I thought, if only I could do that. If I could do that, my life would be perfect. I couldn't believe it. Now, the riding lessons there in Kansas were quite unusual because they didn't really have a time scale. So you were shown where the horses were, and they all had nameplates on their doors, on the stables. And you were shown how to groom, and you were shown how to tack up, and you were shown the way to the outdoor and the indoor school, and you were told a rough set of instructions. But then so were the other people who were also there on that evening. So you would literally be told who you were riding. Off you would go. You would get the horse, you would put the head collar on, lead the horse to the cross ties. That's how they held their horses there. And you would groom the horse, and you would get the tack, and you would put the tack on. And I was always a little bit nervous because I always thought, I hope this tack's on correctly. And I used to call people over, I'd probably be calling 12-year-olds over or something to say, "Is this girth? Is this right?" But, better that than falling off or sliding off. And I would get on, and somebody might say to me, "Right, I want you to concentrate on walking and getting warmed up, and walking maybe at different speeds, and then maybe have a little go at trot and think about your diagonal." So something really basic. And the rider next to you would have their own instructions. And because I think there were 2 outdoor schools, there was a lunging pen, and there was an indoor school that was quite sizable, you would have various people doing their own formations. And then, somebody would walk around, maybe 1 or 2 instructors would walk around, and they would give different people different pointers and hints, and you would ride around a bit more. When you'd been riding for maybe about an hour, then you got off. And if the horse needed walking, if the horse was sweating, for instance, if it was summer, you might put a cooler on and walk round and round and round and round with the cooler until the horse was ready to go back into his or her stable. I also used to, under instruction, I just didn't go on my own, but there were fields around. And sometimes when the lesson portion had ended and they said, go off and, cool your horse down, I would walk around the fields. And from where we were, it was slightly elevated above the town and above the prairies, but I would be in quite long grass. The sun would be setting, and if you know about the sunsets in the Midwest, you'll know that you have hues of purples and oranges. They're quite spectacular, the sunsets. I would be able to hear the coyotes and the insects, the crickets. And I might, from time to time, be able to see a prairie burn way off in the distance. And I remember walking through those fields and thinking, wow, how has a little girl from Warrington got to do all of this? And I felt like the luckiest person in the world. When I came back to England, long story short, I had riding lessons and then I loaned horses and I bought horses, and I've continued with my own horses ever since. Now, although I've cut quite a bit of my horsey journey short, I must admit that when I came back from America, I was quite a nervous rider. And I was nervous because the horses in America very often weren't ridden. And I didn't know much about horses, but I knew that they should be ridden regularly. And sometimes, in fact, most of the time, the only exercise the horse that I would put on would be when I went. So I would be the only one to exercise the horse. And if I missed a week for whatever reason, that horse would be 2 weeks without exercise. And I would be the first person as a very, very novice beginner getting on. And so I used to come off quite a bit. I used to be able to feel the horse and feel the energy. And that horse that I used to ride was called Chansey. And he used to spook quite a lot. If somebody was walking past with a wheelbarrow or something like that, he would spook. And so I kind of got it into my mind that that's what horses did. All horses were very, very wound up when you got on them, and they spooked, and they needed a lot of lunging. If they were really bad, if you really couldn't lead your horse to the cross ties, you needed to lunge quite a lot, and they would spook and rear and kick and all the rest of it. And I thought this was normal. So when I started having lessons and so on, I really started from that place. Although that wasn't true in England, things were very different in England, or in the particular riding stables that I went to. I'm not saying it's the same everywhere in America and it's the same everywhere in England, but this was my experience. But I came back with, I want to say, kind of disguised nerves. So I was very much trying to disguise the fact that I was quite nervous of being a horse rider. But when I started going out to compete at a very low level, that's when the nerves would really kick in, because although I was riding horses that I loved and were usually okay, I think it was just kind of like a remnant, an echo of past nervousness that would come to the fore. And so my light bulb moment to get rid of my nerves came after a lot of searching. And I was searching through the internet quite a lot. I was online on Google and other search engines to try and find something that would help me. So this is in the early 2000s now. And I read about breathing exercises. And breathing exercises only really worked for me when I was already confident. I know lots of people have lots of success with breathing exercises, but they weren't for me. And I tried various ways of reframing things, I suppose, and thinking to myself, how lucky are you to be able to ride this horse or be able to compete, or how lucky are you on so many fronts, physically and financially, all levels You're so lucky to be able to do this." But it didn't reframe my nerves. It made me feel somehow even worse because I had this fantastic opportunity and I wasn't exploiting it to its best. The reason that I got into NLP professionally is because that was the point where I started to break down the nerves and feel so much better. So I went on a training. I didn't book a coaching. I didn't even know you could have NLP coaching, or you could just have a single session with somebody and they would help you out. I didn't know about that. I thought you had to go and have a training. So I went for a training, and the first day that we did techniques, so there's a few days build up, but the first day that we did techniques, we did a technique called swish. I still absolutely adore swish. And something clicked in my brain, something changed, something slotted in place. It really did feel in that room that something had changed. It's very difficult to explain. It was almost like I was trying to recall being nervous. I was trying to imagine putting myself in a situation where I would, in the past, have been nervous, but I couldn't quite get it back. I could get a sort of visual, kind of. Not very good at visuals. I'm much better now, but I wasn't then. But I couldn't get the feeling. I couldn't, whereas I always could. I could always recount that feeling. So that was really quite illuminating for me. I did try. I did tell people that one of the things that I didn't like was Oxers, and I put up a course entirely made of Oxers. It took me ages to carry out all the wings and all the poles, but couldn't get that fear back. And an Oxer that was 60 centimeters, 50 centimeters was frightening to me. It wasn't to do with height, it was the shape somehow. And I just couldn't get that fear back. And I started making the Oxers wider and higher and all kinds of things, and I couldn't get that fear back. And I thought, wow, well, if NLP can do it for my brain, which I always thought was quite stubborn, and my fears, which I thought were pretty ingrained, I was at a point where I thought, well, this is just how riding is. And if I could change, then everyone else can as well. And that's sort of where I started this as a little bit of a hobby business. And then also I started to think, oh, do you know what? I could help quite a lot of people doing this. And I started coaching, and then I got more and more certifications, and now I can train in NLP and other modalities as well. So my takeaway message is that whether you're competing or you're riding for fun in some way, or you're quite serious about improving, not necessarily for competing, but improving yourself, improving your horse, then having a knowledge and mindset really builds that mental strength to focus, but also transform your experience. You start to feel more secure mentally, emotionally, physically, more connected to your horse. And the more you do it, the more present you feel in each and every ride. And the more that we can be in that present moment, so much the better. It's the moment of power. It's the now moment that really holds us and helps us to think about how to go forward. It helps us to step into our very best mindset. And once we have that mindset, then other things start to fall into place. So the fun comes back, the freedom and that fulfillment come back in spades. And so that's why I do what I do. And I really enjoy it. I really enjoy working with riders of all levels, all disciplines. I've been lucky enough to work with an Olympian. also people vying for the Olympics and Paralympics, but I've also lucky enough to have met some fabulous riders who ride purely for pleasure and for leisure. So it doesn't matter what discipline, what level. Mindset is something I think we can all make massive use of. And even people who are confident, mindset isn't only confidence, it's also about having that ability to just be in the moment, to have that ability to focus, to be totally motivated in all the wind and the rain and the hail and the beating sun. I hope that's given you a little bit of insight into me and my riding. Just a few of my likes, just so you can kind of see that I'm a more rounded person than NLP and hypnotherapy and mindset. So what do I love besides riding? Because if you ask a rider what do they love, it's all horses and anything connected with horses. But I also love being outdoors. I really love the sea. I love beaches. I love beaches even in the winter when it's raining. I love the North Wales coastline. I love Scottish beaches. I love history. I'm a bit of a history geek. I love all kinds of history, from ancient history to 20th century history, something that just piques my interest. There was a time when I read all about the Tudors, the Tudor kings and queens of England and Wales. I love going out for a drive and not really knowing where you're going. Just going, just going out, heading out somewhere rural, somewhere in the countryside. I love food. My favourites have got to be things like the sweets, the desserts. So I've always thought, and it's my birthday coming up, and I always think for a special meal, don't bother with the starters, don't bother with the mains, just have 3 desserts. And maybe I'll be brave enough to just have 3 desserts on my birthday because I'm going out for a meal. I love ice cream. Ice cream is just food of the gods. I could probably eat ice cream all day and all night. And people talk about ice cream headaches and things like that. That doesn't bother me. No, I love ice cream. But I also love Asian food, Japanese food, Thai food. I like Italian food too. So I like going out for meals. I like the company. I like chatting with people. I like the atmosphere. I like having a little drink. I enjoy white wine and prosecco, and I also love to be with my family and head off for a long weekend together. That's always quite a lot of fun. So let me know, what do you like doing? Where are you based? Tell me something about you. You can email me, you can contact me on social media, you can share the podcast, you can write me a review if you want to be one of the 10 to 12 lucky people who are on our 1-hour workshop in July. I hope you found it good. I will leave you with that thought. Take care, and I will see you all again soon.